Well, hello everyone, and welcome to episode 67 of Yorkshire Gamers, a Reet Big Wargames podcast. And today it's something a little bit different, a different style of episode that I've been planning for a while. And this is a listener phone in. And just like on radio, when Bradford lose 3-0 at home to Accrington Stanley, everyone can ring in and have a good rant about what's going on. And I put a message out on Facebook and a couple of other places, and we had 11 people come forward to join in on the first ever listener phone in. And unfortunately, a couple couldn't make it, and one was a technical failure. David Knight, really sorry, mate. We just couldn't get a connection on the day. So what you're going to hear is the first ever Wargamer phone in, possibly ever. I'm not aware of another one, but certainly the first Yorkshire Gamer one anyway. So we've got 8 really interesting conversations for you to have a listen to. So sit back as usual, get yourself a cup of tea and a pack of Garibaldis and enjoy the show. Without further ado, here's interviews. Well, hello there, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to episode 67 of the Yorkshire Gamer podcast. And something really different this week. We're going to have a listener phone in. And I've got my first listener already here and ready to go. So, the pride of place of the first guest ever on the listener phone in goes to Gary Wills. Hello, Gary. How are you doing?
Hi, Ken. I was worried being a southerner coming onto your podcast. I was hoping the fact that I married a girl from the East Riding would qualify me. So I'm
Oh,
very
yeah.
honoured indeed.
We'll give you a pass then. And you're south of the avocado line. So whereabouts are you, Gary?
Oh, I live in Loughborough at the moment, but which sort of helps. But I was born in Kingston on Thames in London, so I'm
Uh,
as south as it gets, I guess.
Cockled eels and whelks and all that sort of stuff.
That's right. That's right.
As long as you don't start talking in Cockney rhyming slang, we'll be all right, mate.
No.
Uh, so, Gary, you've come on to have a chat about the what I would call the revolutionary period of the Napoleonic Wars. I'm sure historians have changed their mind on what it's called this week.
Yeah.
And you've kind of got a book out as well called Throwing Thunderbolts that we'll chat about as well. So, just for the audience, then, Gary, just explain what the period that Throwing Thunderbolts covers, that early part of the Napoleonic Wars.
Okay, so I was asked by Hellion to consider writing a Wargamers guide, and when I thought about it, I wanted to focus on the War of the First Coalition, which runs from 1792, so the beginning of the Revolution,
Mm.
through to 1797 and the Treaty of Campo Formio and all that. So it's even just restricting it to that, it's still some 282 battles and combats which are listed in Digby Smith's data book, and so I thought that would be enough, and so I spent a while just looking at that. My starting point was when I retired in 2008. I wanted to write stuff for wargaming, and everybody at the time was writing on Waterloo,
Yeah.
and so being contrary, that Yorkshire wife sort of rubs up on me. I decided I'd write something about Wellington's first battle in Boxtel in 1794, and that sort of opened the door for me to the whole of the French Revolutionary Wars. And over the subsequent 10 years, I did a lot of research on different battles, which are put together into Throwing Thunderbolts.
Yeah, so I think most war gamers would have kind of the the idea of this period as being the Revolutionary Wars and the scruffy urchins singing on Les Mis and all that sort of thing. But it's quite a wider conflict, isn't it? I had a look at the list of the wars that you've covered, and it's more or less a global conflict, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, and one of the things that attracts me about it is that there's a sort of mythology that's grown up about it. You know, people looking back at it from the Napoleonic Wars tend to see it as the brand new, enthusiastic French revolutionaries with their brand new ideas, rushing forward and sweeping away the old armies of the Ancien Regime from Austria, France,
Mm.
and Great Britain. But of course, those 280 battles that I talked about a few minutes ago, actually, the French won half of them and the Allies won half of them. So it was a much, it was a much closer thing than the mythology would have you believe. And I think the other thing about the battle, which the period which is really important, is that the revolution brought together a lot of thinking from the 50 years before 1789, and military thinking, and it found that all that innovation found its expression first during the War of the First Coalition. And one of the things to know about wargamers, having been a wargamer for 50 years, is that they love to highlight the differences between their armies and the guy across the table. And you see this, if you think about the late Napoleonic Wars between 1812 and 1815, arguing the difference between a Prussian army, a French army, an Austrian army, and a Russian army, and arguably even a British army, is like
Yeah,
dancing on a pinhead. Whereas
yeah.
in the 1790s, there are very real differences.
Mm.
And, just for instance, Peter Hofschauer 20 years ago made his name by letting everybody know that at Jena in 1806, the Prussians actually had skirmishers, and he sold loads of books off the back of that.
Yeah.
Of course, the Prussians had skirmishers by then for over 50 years, and the difference was in the 1790s the way they were used. So a game I'm putting on at Salute this year is on Pirmasens, 1793, where 8,000 Prussians beat 13,000 French. And the Duke of Brunswick, the best soldier of the age, didn't even bother calling his light troops in from their vedette lines, because he didn't see them, and the Prussians didn't see them as having a role on the main battlefield. And this is the big difference. It's not whether you got them or not, but how do
Mm.
you use them?
Yeah. The way the commander operates, uses the tools in his toolbox.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when you were putting together the book, then, what was your overall objective? Then, were you trying to concentrate on the history? Were you trying to produce an all-encompassing book for wargamers?
Well, what I wanted to do was make it a book for wargamers. So,
Mm.
but of course, you can't do that without putting some history in. So at the beginning, I do a brief history of the revolution, and that is about 100 pages, which is a military chronology of the wars. And I just basically go around the borders of France saying what happened each year.
Yeah.
And and those 280 battles and how they all fit together, and so people can use that chronology to create their own scenarios. And the other major bit that I wanted to get in was obviously the armies were organised differently, so
Mm.
and it became self-apparent that even so-called experts really were lost track of the differences. So, as an example, a Prussian regiment of infantry at the beginning of the wars had a whole battalion of grenadiers, not two companies, which they went
Mm.
to later on in the wars. So there are subtleties like that, and I wanted to go through all of the protagonists, large and small. So you had obviously Austria, Prussia, the Great Britain, and France, but Naples, Spain, Piedmont, all fought big campaigns. So I needed to cover all of those, as well as the rest of the Holy Roman Empire, of course.
Mm. Yeah. So would a wargamer use a set of Napoleonic rules for this period, or would you recommend a more tightly constrained set of rules?
Well, I, surprisingly, I use black powder,
Right.
and so the thing about black powder is that, I mean, one of the things I wanted to do over the time is
Mm,
demonstrate all my scenarios at shows,
mm,
and
yeah.
black powder works really well for that. But the more I got into using it, the more I realised how much you could tweak it to be very specific to the period. I mean, one of the things with the French volunteer battalions is until 1794 they couldn't form square.
Right.
So all you have to do is in black powder is say they can't form square, and they don't.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you can use the rules, quite easily to mimic it. Whereas something a bit later on would take a bit more working out. Like so, Grand Armée, needs specific rules put in place to
Mm,
make it work. And so I've used DBN as well in one of my games for the higher level. Although I tend to be a battalion man as far as my war
right.
games.
Yeah, it's the way forward on this show, definitely. Uh,
Yeah,
and lots of them as well.
yeah,
Yeah, black powder seems to be one of those sets of rules that people use as a basis and then draft things onto to make them more period specific. Is that something that you cover in the book, Gary, or is that
yeah.
something that you cover that aspect of it? Yeah.
Yeah, no, there are there are 10 scenarios in the book,
Mm,
seven land scenarios and three naval scenarios, and the and six of the seven land scenarios. I've tried to cover all of the major participants. So I did Mondovi for Piedmont, obviously the British with Linsells and Boxtel, and so each one of those scenarios shows how I've modified black powder and the other rule sets that I've
mm,
used to make the scenario work. And I think black powder gets a bad rap mainly because people don't do the scenario work
yeah.
to make sure the game works. So and sometimes they make it too complicated and people lose interest.
Yeah,
But
they seem to be flexible and quite popular, and they're
yeah,
one of those sets of rules that I'm not a massive fan, but I like really really tightly constrained rules in a time
yeah,
period. But what I do like about Black Powder and Pikes and Shot and Hail Caesar is that you can just drop in and have a game, and you
yeah,
can pick
that's
it up
right.
very 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 quickly. So there are benefits to it for sure. Um,
Yeah, sorry. Just an example of why I use it. At Salute the other year, I did the assault on Fort Mulgrave at Toulon, and I had there are four French columns, and I had four players who'd never played the game before
mm,
command each of those columns, and within half an hour they were running the game themselves. And
brilliant.
it's a very easy rule set to get explained to people. It's intuitive as
Mm.
to, oh yeah, you're telling me I give an order to these troops, I roll some dice and they do what I tell them. Yeah, that's exactly it. Yeah, I can
Hopefully do
understand
what
that.
you tell
Yeah, exactly, exactly.
them. Brilliant, brilliant.
Sorry, the other thing I like about the War of the First Coalition is the big leaders that we know about, like
Mm,
Napoleon and others. At Toulon, for instance, Napoleon, although he came up with a plan, everybody knows that, in the
mm,
actual assault on Fort Mulgrave, he was at the back leading two battalions of infantry. Now, most wargamers can simulate that if they want.
mm,
And you have the great man doing that. And another example is Ney, Michel Ney, the bravest of the brave, in 1796, swam the River Sieg at the head of a one regiment of chasseurs à cheval to capture a bridge and force the Austrians back. And these stories are full of them. At Boxtel, there were six brigade and division commanders from Waterloo serving as regimental officers. So there's lots of opportunity to have people you've heard of in these games.
yeah, it's often amazing to me how some of these people survived,
Yeah.
especially people like Ney and Garibaldi, who something I've been reading about quite a lot over the last few years. How he made it past 25, I've got no idea because he was one of these, riding at the front, waving the sword, and also on ships as well with Garibaldi in the early days in South America. Amazing how they stayed alive.
Yeah.
so. Um, so just to kind of go towards wrapping up, then Gary, where can we get hold of this book?
The book's published by Helion, so you can get it from their website and obviously all other reputable booksellers, and so it's widely available. And these days, of course, they never go out of print
No,
because they can always print a few more.
yeah, exactly. And you've got your own YouTube channel, I believe. You were looking to get some more followers, so let's have a little
Yeah,
plug
it's
for that.
yeah, it's a bit small. I think I've got 13,000 views and 230 followers, so it could do
Hey,
with the promotion.
yeah,
And but it's at Gary Wills, Wargamer author, and that should find me. But I think I've sent you the link, so hopefully you can put that on the description.
that's brilliant. And the game at Salute is going to be. You said before, what was it going to be?
It's going to be parmesans, so it'd be Prussians versus the French, and the Prussians were 8,000 strong, the French 13, and the Prussians trounced them. In fact, I've
Right.
just written a blog post for Helion on the Prussian army during the War of the First Coalition, which lays to bed this myth that they were a crap army.
Lovely. Well, that's great to hear. And I've got my Mentana game on at Salute, so I shall try and pop over and say hello and shake
Great.
your hand. So thanks very much for coming on the show today, Gary. It's been much appreciated.
Thank
And
you for the opportunity.
no worries at all. And we'll
Thanks,
be
mate.
over to our next guest very shortly. Well, thank you very much for that, Gary. That was a lovely chat on the Napoleonic Revolutionary Wars, or whatever they're called this week. The First Coalition, I believe it is the correct pronunciation. And we're going to delve into a bit more politically correct terminology now. And on the line, we've got Dex McHenry. How are you doing, Dex?
I'm doing very well, Ken. Doing very well.
Excellent. Now we do know each other, don't we, mate?
We have met in the flesh once or twice. We've
Yeah.
got an acquaintance in common or two.
Yeah, Mr. Alex Sutherland, whose name should not be mentioned because he refused to video me in the last one for Vatman attack because apparently I swear too much, which is just disgraceful. What can I say? And Dex, where are you calling from today, mate?
Sunny Sheffield.
Sunny Sheffield, in God's own county of Yorkshire, of
Absolutely. Not
course.
native, of course, but it's kind of reverse engineering. This used to be Celtic territory, Yorkshire, so I'm taking it back for the old guys, for the old team.
Yeah, sounds good. Sounds good to me, mate. So, what was on your mind that made you want to call in today, Dex?
Well, it's all in the name, isn't it? There's terminology,
Yeah,
and it's what impact that can have. And I noticed you mentioned political correctness there, and I
yeah,
think there's always that immediate risk that if you begin to go down these kind of rabbit holes, people say, "Oh, you're being woke."
yeah,
As people call you that, I've got no idea what the term woke means. But in terms of not necessarily being politically correct, but it's the impact that actually the incorrect terminology can have. And the example I was wanting to go into is specifically the use of the term English Civil War.
yeah. It is an interesting one, and
Yeah,
correctness is something that I'm very keen on. In terms of factual correctness, and I think that's the line that you're going to go down.
it is, and also the impact that just the use of the terminology can have.
When recently the latest issue of Miniature War Games comes out, article on the Band-Aid era, my favourite
Yeah,
period in the index. Here's an introduction to the Renaissance War Band.
yeah, yeah.
What?
Well, indeed.
You are a hobby leading magazine, and
Yeah,
just get the basics right. So the
correct.
English Civil War, I think, just explain to me then where you're coming from with this, because I think it's a terminology that has sort of stuck with all the wars for probably the wrong reasons.
Yeah, indeed. And I say it's not necessarily the use of the term, because when someone says it to you, you can kind of understand generally what they mean.
Mm,
It's the direct impact of it and what it implies.
yeah,
Because it's a bit like your issue with the factions, the whole concept of factions. You know, it's very
shaping.
simple. If someone uses the term, unless they're being very specific, I'm not going to get it, and I'm going to think less of their knowledge and experience. I'll take an example, not necessarily from the English Civil War, but I'm doing some research at the moment on the American involvement in the Philippines, Japanese invasion of the Philippines,
Yeah,
1951. And I came across an article which stated, very clear, black and white, the first tank engagement, which involved armor versus other armor, happened in a place just north of De Mortis in the Philippines in December 1941.
mm,
Interesting engagement, half a dozen tanks per side. But the fact that that would be the first tank engagement of World War II would be news to all those people who were involved in
yeah,
the campaigns in France and the lowlands in the 1940s.
yeah,
So it's that basic error, because basically the article was written by someone who comes from that fairly insignificant country between Mexico and Canada.
mm,
From their point of view, it was right, correct what they were saying, but actually contextually it was completely wrong.
yeah.
And because of that, you look at the article and think, I cannot take this seriously because this individual has not done some basic research. And the English Civil War is in a similar vein to that. Your favourite company, and I don't know whether to name them or not, because I appreciate they haven't yet given you any freebies at the last
Oh, they
count.
won't give me anything.
They won't give you anything. So you don't mind if I
No,
actually
I call them
guess it.
out. Yeah.
Okay. I was waiting with bated breath for their new epic scale miniatures specifically for the Scots and Scotland. So the Covenanters and the Montrose Royalists, Wargamers' favourite, Montrose Royalists. And when that box set first came out, it was heavily pushed as suddenly being English Civil War. And I've already flown my Celtic flag there.
Yeah.
You're talking about Scots, and specifically, my personal interest is the Irish Brigade, on a box which was initially marketed as being English Civil War. So automatically, I'm thinking, well, they obviously haven't done the research on. If they haven't done the research for the marketing and for the box art, they haven't done the research for the uniforms. They haven't done for the unit configurations. So my expectations of it suddenly gone to the degree I'm not going to pick that product up anymore because it's not accurate in my mind. I have to say this for that specific company, Warlord. It looks like when I last checked their web shop, they've kind of removed all of that referencing. But if you go hunting for that particular box set in other shops, other traders will still have it in a section specifically called English Civil War. Now, I know I'm splitting hairs here, but it is specifically that point that if you're not getting it right first time, what implication does that have?
Do you think I think there's two ways to come at this. Is it laziness?
Yeah.
And that's a possibility.
Yeah, sure.
Or is it that we've got access to more information now than we did when I was a lad. You would buy a book by a recognised historian,
Yeah.
and now Dave from Barnsley's got a blog and he's posting stuff, and I've had it with my stuff where people pick something up and run with it, and next thing I know, all papal pikemen are dressed in red and white. So, where do you think it's coming from then?
I think it's possibly a bit of both. There's certainly a laziness element and a familiarity element. I think going back to your famous Venn diagram, where do you stand? Are you a collector, or are you a painter, or actually are you a historian? And do you have a specific research interest in the period? And I think it's a bit of both of those bits. Yeah. Somebody has a passing interest in the period. They want to just get an army off the shelf, so they're going to pick up the old Airfix 1970s English Civil War wargaming book, which, classic in its own right, or Haythorne Waite's, Uniforms of the English Civil War, something like that, and think, yay, it's English Civil War. But actually, of course, it isn't. So I don't necessarily think it's laziness. I think to a degree, a part of it, and let's put it from the non-commercial sense, for the everyday average war gamer, it's because I just want to pick that off the shelf, and they're going to be my next faction. And I think it reflects that mindset. History, if you look at historians, even in the past 20, 25 years, it's only in that period that they've come to terms with the idea that actually that there may be things happening in other places. I think as Peter Young made an interesting point about, English historians, Scottish historians, and Irish historians have kind of worked in isolation over the years, and suddenly, some of them are realizing, well, there's something going on over there. But if the English historians say, well, there's something going on over there, they're going to put it predominantly in the context of, well, it's all about England, isn't it? Likewise, Irish historians are going to say, well, it's all about the Irish Catholic Confederacy, or the plantation or whatever. So the historians don't necessarily help because the histories haven't developed fast enough to keep up with that. Although that has changed, let's say, over the past 10 to 15 years. And there's a lot of discussion about, well, what should we actually call that period between 1638 and 1653. Stuart Reid, fantastic historian, again, a Wargamers darling. His All the King's Armies, he specifically called it a military history of the English Civil Wars. And that's interesting. He uses the term wars plural as opposed to just English Civil War, so automatically you've got a bit of a movement. But he points out within that his introduction that there is that old joke. The English Civil War was neither English nor civil. Probably, just about. There were a series of wars, not one. And if you look at the whole extent of it, you're talking Ireland through to eastern England, the top of Scotland all the way down to Cornwall. And he says, and what about all the other territories? Because there was fighting in the colonies, in Virginia, right across, not a world war, but anywhere that Britain had possessions, some aspect of the Civil War was playing out. And that's even without including the naval elements.
Yes.
Prince Rupert, for example, often most people only think of him as a land commander, yet he was an exemplary naval commander. In many ways, the Nelson of his day, in terms of his ideas and his tactical and then strategic genius in the use of developing naval warfare, absolute genius. Yet nobody talks about that. So there's something about just the term. It's lazy. English Civil War, lazy. It's easy. It's a shorthand. Come back to your earlier point. I think it's a secondary element, and it's not about political correctness. It's about people don't want to get into those dirty areas.
Yes, yeah.
Because it wasn't a civil war, and the further you go away from England, the less civil it becomes. And even within England, it wasn't 20 degrees civil. If your local villager is being pillaged by the royalists looking for billets on Wednesday, and on Thursday the parliamentarians come along and also pillage you, that's a reality of life for many. But it was far worse in Scotland and in Ireland.
It still has an effect today, doesn't it? I mean, if you walked into a pub in Southern Ireland with an I Love Cromwell t-shirt on, I would suggest that you would come out with less limbs than you went in.
You'd probably be the centre of a good discussion. Yeah, centre of a good discussion.
Yeah,
but I'll tell you how not far away it is, and I've made this point to a few people. When I got into researching the Irish Brigade, so I'm not from Sheffield, but I was born in Warwickshire, and I've lived more than half my life over this side of the pond. I did grow up in rural Northern Ireland. One of the interesting things when I was researching the Irish Brigade was there's an existing a surviving list of the officers for the three regiments which went over, and they read almost identically to my school registers.
Right. Wow.
So your classroom would be O'Cahan, McHenry, Some of the spellings have changed, but the names are virtually identical. things perhaps haven't changed as much as people think.
Oh, that's very true. Do you think there's an element of people just not caring anymore, and playing the game for the game's sake rather than for the history's sake?
Absolutely. And you're back to your
Yeah,
Venn diagram. Yeah, it's people who
yeah.
just want to play the game. Yeah, I just want to get my toys on the table. I don't really care about anything else. And whilst part of me respects that, we're back to the question of what's wargaming all about. Is it a game?
Mm,
And I kind of take a slightly different view. I do a lot of World War II gaming,
yeah.
as you know. I play a lot of Chain of Command, plug, plug.
Mm.
Version 2 on the horizon, good stuff.
But they two fat laddies get too many plugs in this show.
But it's a game, but it's also a degree of, in my mind, remembrance. And my father was a World War II veteran, and he knew I played games. He didn't, so I might have an issue with it. But at the same time, I want to get it right because you're not just playing a game. The uniforms have got to be right for the period. The individuals have got to be right because it's part of, in my mind, of remembrance.
Yes.
But our kind of social remembrance goes back just to World War II. World War One barely. We still got some names on bits of stone in the odd village green. Go back beyond that, nobody remembers it the same way. And part of me questions why. And if you're not remembering it the same way, I almost feel there's an individual responsibility to actually do your research, get your research right. And in a fashion, you're doing some justice to those individuals who fought.
And you're then passing that knowledge on, which I think is important. Like the old ancient Viking sagas. That's how the information was passed on. I'm not suggesting somebody does a 260 verse poem on the Wars of the Three Kingdoms and recites it to the children. But I think it's important, and very much. I've said before on the show that my grandfather was involved in the Desert Rats, and if you said to him, bless him, he's not alive anymore, but if you said to him what faction you were in, he would have got his entrenching tool out of the garage and re-educated you very quickly with it. So it is very much a matter of respect. So Wars of the Three Kingdoms, then, do you think that is the best overall term?
It's the best at the moment. Some people also use the term British Civil Wars, but that kind of conflates or confuses the whole notion of Britain, British Isles, and has some issues itself. But Wars of the Three Kingdoms seems to be the easiest format. Although another acquaintance of mine, Mike Cheatham, keeps a fantastic blog, Keep Your Powder Dry. Yeah, one of the best examples of well-researched work on the period. And his view is Wars of the Three Kingdoms sounds a little bit Tolkien-esque.
Right, yeah, I get that.
Yeah, and I understand that, but actually it is kind of the best compromise term. If you want to talk about the English Civil Wars, great, but your Montrose army aren't a feature of that in any degree whatsoever. If you want to play the Second English Civil War, then you can at least include some Scots Covenanters in that.
Yeah.
And it is back to that thing about accuracy. And if you're gonna use that terminology, expect that some individuals won't take you seriously because you don't know anything about it. Yeah, it's like that. Going back to that example at the start, an individual historian from that country between Mexico and Canada says, the first tank battle of World War II happened in the Philippines in December 1941. No, it didn't actually. It's factually incorrect, and I'm not going to take you seriously anymore because of that. Which is a little bit, childish. A little bit.
I don't think it is. I honestly don't think we're singing from the same hymn sheet. I'm very keen on historical accuracy as much as you can, and then if you're doing something slightly off track, I always say I have a little thing on my when I do a post that says I always put pedants corner so that the pedants get really upset, and then you can have another laugh. Just saying, like, the Narvik project that I'm doing at the moment, all the ships were light grey, but I'm doing them with a small bits of camouflage here and there, so if you come along, Dex, I don't know, you've been up to
Yep.
the fjords recently, but you might not know the difference between Z13 and Z12.
No, I
But if you're playing a game across a 32-foot table, you just go, the one with the red turrets, please.
you need to.
So
Yeah, yeah,
so much easier. So
yeah,
much easier. Well,
yeah.
well, mate, it's been wonderful chatting with you, and we've had a bit longer than we thought because we had unfortunately my previous caller dropped out, but it's been wonderful to chat with you, mate. And when are you?
Okay.
Is your next show you going to?
You know what? I don't know.
Are
I
you be
don't
at
know.
Hammerhead?
Possibly.
Possibly.
I think there's something in Chilcon might be actually the next one I've got
Ah,
tickets for.
right. I've not been to that one. Maybe I'm not chilled enough.
Sheffield and Derby. I think it's in Sheffield this year.
Oh, fantastic, mate. Well, thanks once again, Dex, and
Thank you.
we'll see you
Been very
soon, mate.
cathartic. Thank you, Ken.
Cheers, mate.
Take
Bye.
care. Bye bye.
Well, thanks very much there, Dex, for our little chat about the naming of the different parts of the English Civil War. And we're going to move on to a very different topic now. And my guest, Neil, wants to talk about contrast paints. So, Neil, have you listened to the podcast and heard my views on contrast paints?
Yes, I have indeed, and that's what jogged me to reach out to you, and I thought I'd fight their corner.
Oh, good lad, good lad. That's what I like to hear. So, just tell us a little bit about yourself, Neil. Where are you? What sort of age are you? And what sort of gaming do you do?
Yeah, so I live near Southampton. I'm in mid-30s, and I suppose I do a range of things. I quite like kind of reasonably big battles, but at the moment, due to having a young child, I'm mostly painting rather than gaming, unfortunately.
Yeah, no, that happens, and obviously you can tell from the colour of my hair that I've been through. Well, at least I've got some. At least I've got some.
Yeah, exactly. I think mine's starting to fall out. So.
That people go through that cycle, and I've got lots of friends who gave up gaming completely when they had children, because it is quite often a full-time job. So what got you into the hobby then, Neil? What were you, a Warhammer kid, or?
Yeah, so so when I was younger, my brother and I we delved into the realm of Warhammer 40k. Did that a little bit in my kind of early teenage years, and then kind of drifted away from it. I've also always enjoyed kind of scale modeling, airfix kits, that kind of thing.
Cool. Yeah.
And then really it was probably during lockdown that kind of got back into painting again. Initially started doing some Imperial Guard for Warhammer 40k. To be honest, got a bit fed up of Warhammer 40k prices, and
Yeah,
also I've
not cheap.
always enjoyed history, so moved on to more historicals.
Superb. And how did you learn to paint then? What was your kind of schooling, if you like, on putting paint on miniatures?
To be honest, a lot of watching YouTube videos and etc.,
Yeah.
and then just trying things out on actual miniatures because when I was painting back in my teens, it was just a case of don't even bother to prime, just slap the paint on, hope for the best.
Yeah.
And in hindsight, the models were probably terrible. But then during COVID, I kind of tried a few different techniques, watched more YouTube videos. There's so much content out there. It's such a great resource if you're not sure how to approach it. And I think the more you practice, the easier it gets and the better you get.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing to look at from my perspective. In that, I didn't have YouTube, and it was kind of a word of mouth thing, more or less. And I was lucky that I had a friend called Carl who was at art college who came up with all these wonderful things that now people call washes, and he was like making them himself. Um, so was it quite confusing then with all this plethora of information to kind of go, right, I'm going to paint like that?
Yeah, definitely. I think the thing at the moment is that there's so many different products on the market that as a
Yeah.
newbie, it can be quite intimidating.
Mm.
And I think another point is if you watch too many YouTube videos, there are some really good painters out there, and it can be really intimidating because you feel as if your standard is never going to be up to theirs. And I think the thing to do is just take a step back and say to yourself, you know what, I'm just going to paint something. The more I paint, the better I'll get. And also, set your own standards. I think don't let someone on YouTube set the standard. And especially with, coming around to maybe the contrast issue in a minute, especially with big battle games, I find it's more the look of the unit. It's not necessarily the look of the individual miniature. And I think that's really important.
Yeah, the 3 foot rule is
exactly.
quite common in historical. I have a 3-inch rule at ×6 magnification when I do my stuff. That's just me. Because I get it. There's different styles of painting and different types of painting, and if you've listened to the podcast, you know all about the Venn diagram of wargaming and how people see the painting of the miniatures in different ways. So just take yourself back then to COVID, and you're getting back into painting your miniatures. Was it then that you looked at contrast paints, or how did it come into your palette? Hey, do you like that?
It definitely was. So I because I initially started painting some more Warhammer 40k stuff. I think, going to like a Games Workshop shop and seeing the new contrast paints, and they were kind of all the rage at the time, just come out. So there's a lot about them on the internet, and I thought I'd give them a go, and started using them, got some okay results, and then as I got into historicals, I thought, well, how can I use these on historical figures to help kind of speed things along and really build the armies that I want to build in a reasonable space of time. So. And obviously, I don't purely use contrast paints. I use normal acrylics and other paints as well. But I just, I would say that contrast is a key part of my toolbox, so to speak, to help me get things done.
And were you already? You see, my issue is that I undercoat in black, and contrast on black doesn't work, does it? Because you've already got a black base, and so it's a non-starter for me, because I'd have to completely change the way that I painted. So were you already undercoating in a lighter colour then when you started to use them?
Yeah, I was already undercoating, I would say, in like a light grey, and then recently I've tried just a pure white as well. But to your point, yes, it does mean that you basically have to paint the whole model. If you leave anything uncovered, then you've just got some bright white dots or lines all over the place, which isn't ideal.
Yeah, it can from what I've seen, it can lead to quick results, but it can lead to results where you think there's a bit missing there.
Yeah, definitely.
So
just under an armpit or something.
It's like, that doesn't quite look right. How do you decide then what you're going to use the contrast paints for, and then what you're going to use acrylics for? How do you work the process out?
So I think the first point is, I think it's the army painter now do their speed paint metallics, but I would just use standard metallics acrylics, because I think they look better than using a contrast for those. So first of all, metallics are just standard, but really it's there's a few things I think that contrast is really good for. So anything like cloth with lots of folds, lots of sculpted in folds. One thing I did recently that is really useful on is kind of musculature. So I did some galls, and any kind of like topless galls with a kind of chiseled abs. It's actually really good for that, because it just flows into it defines the musculature. So
I would just to interrupt there, I would love to know what the gym system was in ancient Gaul, because I cannot believe that all of them had such muscular physique. But yeah, sorry, go on.
I think they're just fighting Romans all day long, so you get pretty fit.
Yeah, exactly.
But I think anything, and with the quality of miniatures that are out now, I would say the majority of miniatures now have really nicely defined features. So anything like that, where the contrast can just sit into the crevices, is it really works well. It doesn't work so well on kind of flat areas. So I wouldn't use it for. I definitely wouldn't use it for kind of vehicles or anything like that. And I think any kind of flat areas, it's really a no-go. So that's where I use more standard acrylics. But sometimes I use contrast and acrylics in conjunction. So, a contrast, like for example, with the Gauls, a good one would be use a contrast to get your base coat down and to pick out the musculature, and then with some more highlights on the muscles to actually kind of make them stand out a bit more.
So, from what you're saying there, the figure plays a big part in how you're going to do it. So, if you were painting an old school figure with less detail in like folds and less sort of contours on the figure, it wouldn't work as well.
No, that's right. I don't think it would. I think any figure where you kind of have to add the detail with paint, the contrast won't be a good one to use.
Do you think it's made it faster?
Definitely. I'll have to send you some photos after this as well. But
Yeah.
as a comparison, I've done some American Civil War figures, and I think in contrast, it's probably about a third of the time.
Okay.
So, and again, I've got quite a large English Civil War collection, and doing some of those in contrast, I think it's in the region of about 10 minutes a model, something like that.
Right. Okay.
So
that's pretty cool.
And I'm not gonna pretend that I get a result that's as good as a more traditional painting method or layered highlights or anything. But if you want to get a regiment on the table, then it's really useful, especially if you've got limited time.
Yeah, exactly. And so, how much time would you have then in a week to paint? Would do you set aside time, or do you just grab a minute when you can?
Yeah, and I'll definitely try and do in the evenings once the little one's in bed. Then try and grab an hour or so. Just helps me relax from the day at work.
Yeah, no, it is one of the most relaxing hobbies going for that sort of thing. And have you stuck with the GW contrast paints that you started with, or have you tried the speed paints and the quick paints and the slightly faster paints and all the other ones that have come out in the meantime?
Yeah, no, I've at the moment I've stuck with the original contrast from GW.
No.
But that's not to say I wouldn't try the others. I just haven't gotten around to buying them yet.
Yeah, it's becoming unlike the paints, which are undersaturated. It's becoming an oversaturated market when it comes
definitely.
to that. I mean, have you ever tried? I'm just throwing this out, but have you ever tried watering down the paint that you'd already got?
Yes, I have. Yeah.
You have. Okay, right. How did that go?
Yeah, it's it's very similar. I think actually if you thin it out with a kind of like a thinning medium rather than just water, you probably get basically a contrast paint, almost. It's not quite the same thinned out with water, but I do take your point that you can kind of make your own. But I think the thing I like about the GW is they're in a bottle and you can use contrast paint straight out the bottle. So there's no messing around. You just open your bottle of paint and off you go.
Yeah, I think convenience plays a big part in it, doesn't it? Having them there and ready to go.
Yes.
So the future then, Neil, are you going to continue with contrast paints, or when your kids have grown up and gone to university, are you going to start using oil paints and other things, other eccentricities?
Yeah, I think I'll use them in conjunction with traditional acrylics. There are some projects where I've kind of started in traditional acrylics, like most of my ACW. So I'll probably continue with them on that, so that it's not kind of you don't have two different painting styles. But I'll just use them as part of my toolkit now, I think. But just for sake of speed, I think they can be really useful.
Excellent. Well, you won't have sold me because I'm not changing my undercoat, but I'm sure other people will listen. And I've not mentioned it until now, but I've got to say, Neil Armstrong. Did that cause problems at school?
It didn't. I think my parents were having a laugh, to be honest.
Ah, very good. I didn't use the joke that contrast paints were one giant leap for mankind that I was going to use.
That's a new one.
Yeah, it's a new one. All right, mate. Well, thanks very much for being part of the show, Neil. And this will be out in a week or so's time. So good luck with your contrast paints, mate.
Thanks very much. Bye.
Okay, so lovely chat with Neil there about the uses or not of contrast paints. And we move on now to our next caller, Simon Stokes, somebody who joined in the Jutland game at Salute last year. So hello, Simon, how are you?
Evening, Ken. I'm doing well, thanks. Yourselves?
Yeah, lovely. Whereabouts in the UK are you, mate?
Milton Keynes.
Milton Keynes, so below the avocado line?
Yes, although I'm not a big avocado fan, but yeah, probably below the avocado line, absolutely.
So, Simon, you want to talk about the Dark Ages?
Yes, me, Michael Wood agree. It is the Dark Ages.
This is the Dark Ages. Yeah, I actually saw something yesterday where somebody said it was offensive to call it the Dark Ages.
Offensive.
I'm not quite sure who we're offending.
No, yeah, I suspect they're long dead and beyond caring. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Considering that there's nobody left from World War One, I am going to base logically that there's nobody left from the Dark Ages to be offended.
They've got a lot to answer for if they are. Yeah, absolutely.
So, go on then, Simon. What's your Dark Ages issue, other than the name?
Yeah. So, I think that big battles set in the Dark Age period in Britain, maybe, are a really great way to get people into the big game.
Yeah.
And I think it's a low bar of entry in terms of there's not very many different types of figures that you need. It's typically spearmen and a few guys in mail and axes, and it's very narrative, so that the leaders are the guys that are at the front. If your earl or your king isn't fighting in the front rank, then typically his army starts to disappear, and so it's a very kind of narrative way of wargaming. Particularly if you see the new rules, something like Midgard, but even with the more traditional rules, you've got lots of things you can do with the scenarios. You've got things like supposedly magic banners or cursed banners, or warlords that have a particular bent in terms of who they're going to fight and who they're not going to fight. And it's a great way of collecting together all of your club's individual little collections of saga figures, sticking them all together, using the thing that you don't like, which is Sabo bases, putting them into big places, and fighting big battles.
I think you mentioned in your sort of contact with me that there was a feeling. Some people had this feeling that it was just a rugby scrum. Of people pushing backwards and forwards. So, kind of, what's the antidote to that then?
It's tactics and ruses. So you've got things like the boar snout, which is something that if you ever go to the reenactors, that they're very keen to show you what that means in that kind of medieval world, and that's the way of getting your biggest, chunkiest guys in a formation that's going to punch through the shield wall. And any Wargames rules that are worth their salt, they give the advantage for being supported in the flanks, but they also give the penalty for if that shield wall is broken. If someone gets in behind the shield wall, then it's often kind of game over for them, certainly for that section of the line. And ruses as well. So the Vikings were very, very fond of subterfuge. An ambush. I think there was one of the sagas. One of the Vikings in France pretended to be dead, and
Okay.
and he said it is his final wish to be buried in the cathedral of the town that they were besieging.
Yeah.
Because he converted to Christianity, and of course he wasn't dead. And in the coffin were all of the weapons for all of the guys that were following him. So it's that kind of thing. They were very fond of that kind of ambush or kind of double dealing, and you can build that into your scenario. So it's a very kind of narrative way of wargaming. It's kind of like the antithesis of that kind of points based competition type game. Yeah.
It sounds like that was the sort of the modern version of the Trojan horse.
Yeah.
But for Vikings times, super story.
Yeah.
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 What
Yeah.
do you think? Do you think then that we have been let down by rule sets in the past? Is that where this comes from? And these more modern rule sets are starting to bring in that myth and mirth and magic and hero type figure.
I think there's an element of that. So you've got some of the simpler forms of a wargame rule set, something like Lion Rampant, really doesn't give the advantage of the rank and flank support. Something like Midgard does. My personal rules of choice are Mortimer Gloriam, but most of the big battle rules do bring that in, and the kind of acid test of is it a good rule set is, can you bring in scenario rules? So you can say, is it easy to add in something like the magical banner or hidden movement, hidden troops, or is it easily extended to give that scenario narrative feel about it? And my experience from having big multiplayer games is that everyone enjoys it, and there's normally a tale to be told at the end of it. Often counter history. Yeah, it's very good for campaigns as well, because we've done several Dark Age type campaigns, and obviously because the leaders are so pivotal to it, then you start getting reputation points for your leaders, the more battles that they win, and that gives them an advantage in the campaign. But of course, if your leader is fighting in the front rank and he dies, that's typically very bad for your for your nation or your tribe or your. I won't use the F word.
Yeah. No, definitely not. It seems to, I've talked about with one of my other guests about a different period. But that leadership from the front was very important in this time, wasn't it? As you say,
absolutely.
But it amazes me how we don't get like a slaughter of the senior people, and how they managed to survive. I don't know whether it was luck or blessings or 4-leaf clovers in the pocket.
Sometimes you did, and this was the thing. So one of the reasons why the Battle of Hastings was so decisive was that when Harold Godwinson dies, both of his other remaining brothers already lie dead on the battlefield. He was the last brother standing, so there wasn't anyone really to take over. So it's high risk, but potentially high reward as well.
Figures for the period.
For Dark Age Wargames figures, there's almost a complete absence of button counters, because although there's a lot of academic study and the reenactors do a really good job, almost every one of them says actually, this isn't our best guess. There's there's no certainty about anything that I'm telling you because they've got so few finds that it's most of it is a kind of detective work. So there is no one there saying you've got the wrong.
Is there a sort of cross use then for figures? Can you use them in different armies, or is there a big difference between the? I'm not going to say the F word, but the different forces involved.
Yes, exactly. The Normans do tend to look very different.
Yeah,
but mostly most of your army is made up of the kind of bog standard spearmen, and whichever army that they're in, they're typically going to look very similar. They're guys that have been called up through some sort of fealty to the Lord, and they're given a spear and a shield, and if they're lucky, a helmet. Even if it's only made of boiled leather. And basically, that they're expected to know how to use the thing, but then they just line up in the ranks. So if you're doing a campaign, and you're fighting the battle, then you've got relatively few different troop types that you need to have figures for. It's not like if you're fighting a Napoleonic campaign and I don't know, Radetzky's brigade have weird kind of pink and green uniforms. Then you think, oh, I haven't got any of them. So it's quite easy to pull together the forces to fight a campaign battle with them. Like I say, it's a great way of getting into big battles and campaigns and pulling figures that that a lot of people down the club have already got. And getting playing.
Yeah, I was just thinking of kind of things to get enthused around this sort of time period. And was it the Last Kingdom or the Bernard Cornwell series that was turned into a television program? That was around this time, wasn't it?
It was absolutely. And there's another TV series that's going to be aired later on this year. Set around Battle of Hastings, so William the Conqueror and Harold Hardrada and all those guys. And there are other books around as well. So it's a fairly well represented period in both literary and in film terms.
Excellent. Well, hopefully we'll have turned some people onto the Dark Ages or the early medieval period or the really early Renaissance period or what the late ancients period, whatever they want to call it this week. But you're with me and Michael Wood, are you, Simon?
Absolutely, 100%.
Excellent, that's brilliant. Well, we did have some technical issues, which I hope I've managed to wheedle out in the edit. But thanks very much for your time today, Simon.
Cheers, Ken. Look forward to hearing it.
Cheers, mate. Okay, so thanks very much there from Simon, chatting about a period that's quite misunderstood, the Dark Ages, and moving on to another period now with its own troubles, is World War One, and I've got a couple of guys on the line, Sam and James, and they're from Warfulcrum. And they're working on some World War One rules at the moment. So just say hi, guys.
Hi there.
Good evening.
Good evening. And as with any radio phone-in, we've got to ask where you are in the world. So, Sam, whereabouts are you?
I am in London, East London.
Lovely. And James?
I'm in South London, in Greenwich.
Oh, so both of you south of the avocado line, as we call it, on this show.
Here be avocados.
Yeah, they are everywhere here.
They are. Yeah, you can't go anywhere in London without a smashed avocado being thrown at you. So guys, then Warfulcrum. Just one of you, just take it away and tell us what's that all about.
Yeah, sure, go on. Why don't I jump in? So basically, Warfulcrum Games is just nom de guerre, as it were, that we've come up with.
Yeah.
it's essentially me and James, and we are developing some wargaming rules. You just mentioned World War One rules under that name. So, yeah.
Is this the first set of rules that you've done, Sam, or is it from a series of rules that you've worked on in the past?
So it's the first set of rules that have come this far, as it were. So it's the first ones that certainly I've ever thought about putting out, and I think the same on James's part.
Yeah, absolutely.
I do, however, though, have many a Word document on my computer. To say this is the first game is, it might be about the 20th, but yeah, there's a whole bunch of carcasses of previous games.
Oh, yeah, excellent. So, James, what's kind of your background in wargaming then? What sort of generation are you?
So I began in probably the early 2000s with the Middle-earth strategy battle game. Big Lord of the Rings fan when I was younger. So the magazines hooked me in. And then from that, kind of quickly went into Warhammer and that thing. But as I was doing my history degree, I was very much like, actually, no, I really like historical gaming. There wasn't much of a scene where I was growing up for it. And I kind of ended up writing my own rule set, which was 1918 when I was at university.
Oh, brilliant.
Because I wanted to play First World War war games. That was my academic specialism at the time. And rather than doing my dissertation and my degree, I was like, I'll just make a war game instead. And that was the genesis of this game, all about over a decade ago now. Although it was left kind of idling in the back of my mind until I just met Sam a few years ago and was like, do you want a game of this? And then it kind of went from there and basically restarted from there.
Yeah, cool. Sam, you've got a similar sort of backstory in terms of gaming?
Ish. So yeah, the first war game I ever came across was the second edition Warhammer 40k box set. A friend of mine had that. I think it might have been slightly long in the tooth because it was about about 2000. So I think it was probably maybe just moving into the third edition of 40k at the time. But yeah, similarly, did the whole kind of Warhammer and stuff thing for a bit, and then like James, different universities, didn't know each other at the time, but I also studied history at university, was very much into historical gaming. So when I came back into wargaming in my 20s, largely historical, a bit of sci-fi and fantasy on the edges.
So how did you guys meet then? Is there kind of a Lonely Wargamers website out there you met on, or how did you come to meet each other?
So we met through Hackney Area Tabletop Enthusiasts, which is a northeast London wargaming club. Quite a big one in London. Been going for quite a while now as well, I think.
Yeah. Quite used to be based in Bethnal Green Working Man's Club. That closed down though, sadly. So they've just moved to a new location now. That they've been not for very long, few months now.
Yeah. So James, then the 1918 rules were kind of started by yourself then. So what's the spark? What's the interest in World War One, and then what's the interest in that later period of World War One?
So it began kind of as I was doing research on propaganda and patriotism and recruitment in the First World War as part of my degree, and I felt it's an underrepresented period both academically and but it's so well known in the popular imagination. It's so emblematic of a wider kind of historical consciousness in Britain, which is you see monuments in every town. We recognize it on November the 11th every single day. It's so ingrained, but yet so misunderstood almost. And I wanted to kind of look at that. And as I was marrying it with my love of wargaming, I was like, there's so many World War II games, but there's very little World War One. And then I was thinking, well, probably because before 1918 and after 1914, those few years between, it's not the most exciting period to wargame. You have some absolutely brutal offensives, but not much movement. Technology is largely static, and I don't think many people would be interested in a tactical or strategic wargame set between, like, in 1915. It would be pretty ruthless, and all the sides would be pretty stagnant. So 1918 evolved of like, well, this is the culmination of those long wars technology in the period is at its apex. You have tanks, you have aircraft, you have balloons, and everything in between. But it's also kind of archaic. You also still have pigeons and signalers and everything like that as well. So it's quite curious.
Hey,
And it
we still have pigeons in Yorkshire, lad, now.
they're everywhere here as well.
Yeah, you can't move in London for pigeons; they're everywhere.
Yeah, or eat.
We look after ours now, though. We don't leave them in the tube station with one leg.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it was very much this is something unique and a year that's particularly interesting, because you've got the evolution of, like, in Germany, mission tactics, so the stormtroopers, everything like that. Suddenly we're moving from company to platoon level in terms of engagement, which is what the game focuses on. But you've also got early tanks, aircraft working in conjunction with ground attacks, things like that as well, which is quite exciting as a wargamer.
Yeah, there's a lot of really exciting stuff to explore, and you've also got a really interesting stage in terms of, this is the point in the war where, Germany is on the back foot, but things aren't looking great for the Allies either. The French in particular looking quite worn out. The Germans just launched their spring offensive in spring, unsurprisingly, in March. And they've got actually a pretty decent crack, at perhaps winning the war in the few months following that. And things are looking extremely dicey for the Allies. And then obviously you've got a big series of quite, kind of cutting edge offensives that in the 100 Days from the Allies, where they use all the weapons and technology that James has talked about in, essentially quite new and exciting ways that we would now these days recognize as modern warfare, albeit with the training wheels on slightly.
Yeah. So did your history degree, did your love of history get you interested in World War One, Sam, or was it meeting James and getting into the game?
So World War One's an interesting one. So I mean, in terms of general historical interest, studying history and so on definitely helped, but just a general interest in other things as well. I mean, it's interesting actually, because World War One had always sort of been on my radar as a sort of historical phenomenon, because it's pretty hard to live in the UK and not be aware of World War One.
Yeah.
And obviously there were some really good movies and so on that started coming out in recent years. So something things like 1917, All Quiet on the Western Front. There's some older ones as well. And so, partly it was, James sort of popped up one day and sort of, mentioned like, I've got this First World War game First World One war game that I've been messing around with. Do you want to give it a go, kind of thing? And then, played a couple of games of it and thought, and then went away. I owe a few debts to a few different people, but in particular, the Great War channel on YouTube is really good. Lots of other, Storm. I went and read Storm of Steel, the classic book stuff, and pretty quickly was like, what? There's something here. This is a underappreciated gem. So I'm a later convert than James. James is the OG, but you know what they say about new converts, right? They're even more zealous.
I would completely agree with that. I'm long in the tooth.
Yeah.
If I'm the original ally, Sam is the US coming to my rescue.
you were flagging and you weren't kind of quite going to make it, but Sam's there with the
yeah, exactly.
And how appropriate that your name is Sam. Uncle Sam turns up at the last minute and
That's a very good point,
and saves the day, which is fantastic.
James or Jean.
So then, James, what sort of size of game is it? The 1918. What is your base unit for movement? That sort of thing.
So it's a 28mm scale miniatures, platoon to company level. So you're looking around 40 plus miniatures at an average game aside.
Okay. Yeah.
Your general force will be composed of a platoon with a platoon commander, and then you get kind of attachments like battalion support, which could be your machine gun teams, could be light field guns, and then you get divisional support that could be your tanks, but also could be off-map artillery, so full batteries of artillery as well in the larger scale games.
And Sam, sort of, what's your role then? Have you been tweaking? Have you been researching? How have you been sort of adding to James's initial mix?
I guess in some ways it's like some of the core things of the game were there at the original. So like things like I don't know, the stat line for example for units have remained pretty similar, but I guess part of what I've been doing quite a lot on is the sort of like game mechanics into particularly in terms of like how the sort of turn structure and the kind of how you sort of play around with things like orders and activations, and try and sort of capture that feel of the junior command level, where the game is kind of putting you in the shoes of a lieutenant or perhaps a captain, and you're having to think about how you control and kind of have influence on the battlefield and get your guys moving when they're pinned down and all that sort of thing. So quite a lot of it's been on the rules mechanics, but obviously James has been involved quite a bit in those as well, so like it's a bit of a dual effort really. Army lists as well in particular have done quite a lot on particularly the German and French army lists.
Brilliant. And sort of both of you then, how important is the historical accuracy side of things with this? Is it a game based around World War One, or is it a World War One game? If you see what I mean.
So we wanted to approach it not as in like it doesn't cover the minutiae of history, because I don't think that would make a very fun game. You're not going to be checking to make sure that your rifle is filled with mud. Can you shoot properly? That kind of level of crunch just isn't there. But it is an attempt to capture the feel of it. So our accuracy is we've been making sure that platoons and army lists are as close as we can get. And I think that's important because so much of the information is just not there. It might be for Britain, for instance. Britain was quite easy to research in terms of how a platoon was organised. But Belgium, for instance, for a later potential supplement, was incredibly difficult. And I had to get in touch with some people in the Belgian army to find out things, which is very interesting. But we want to make sure that it feels like a First World War game, not like just a war game that's set in the First World War. Every element of it, even down to the way the rulebook looks, is designed to emulate the 1910s.
Oh, brilliant. Same for you, is that, Sam?
Yeah, I mean, the way I kind of have a little way of thinking about this, which is that I think sometimes history or kind of trying to make things historically, accurate is seen as a kind of a restriction or a kind of limitation. I think actually the way that we've approached this is to kind of really lean in it and see it as those as kind of opportunities. So as James says, where you get, interesting and weird and wonderful platoon structures and odd weapons that, probably never made it into World War II, for example, we've made sure that we're kind of picking those out and letting players kind of fully reflect the flavor of the period. And I guess the other thing is that, it's a really important thing for me to get into the rules was that sense of something that is representing the fire and maneuver and suppression tactics of modern warfare. So the game is very much designed to allow you to use those historical tactics where you can use suppression fire, particularly from, machine guns, for example, to pin down your enemy, units which have got pins, it makes it harder for them to move, shoot back, etc. And then obviously that lets you then kind of get your guys forward, as it were. So the game is definitely trying to tap into those kind of historical tactics that by 1918 have really, really come to the fore, which, to be honest, were barely in they're kind of in their infancy in 1914. So the pace of development in terms of infantry tactics in World War One is off the scale.
Yeah. Are you familiar with Alex Sutherland?
Yes.
Yeah. Alex does the Brews in the Vineyard episodes of this podcast, and he's quite vocal about World War One rules, and I think you guys are ticking the right boxes for him. But you've got to assure us that there's no goblins in it.
Absolutely not. No. I'm very much against any kind of his fantasy level. There's a lot of really exciting games around the First World War that emulate the First World War that kind of have that either grim dark or fantasy element, and that's not the kind of game we're looking for. Maybe in the future in a different game.
Yeah, it just seems to be because there was, I think it was called Doggerland, and then
Yeah.
obviously this Trench Crusade recently. It just seems I don't know why that period of history is being seen as a particularly good setting for these sorts of games, but it seems to have caught on. And Trench Crusade got something like $6 million or something like that on Kickstarter.
Yeah,
which is
huge,
huge
amount.
crazy.
Yeah, I mean, kudos to them. Like, they found a market for a thing that people want, and that that's great. But it's definitely not what we're doing with 1918. 1918 is definitely a historical game. Closest thing you're going to get to a goblin is a Frenchman covered in mud.
Yeah. Well, somebody's had a vat of pea soup explode in front of them, and they've turned green.
Or there's a little goblin painted on the side of a tank or something.
Yes, G company or something. Yeah, you can imagine.
Yeah, tangled goblin.
Oh, that's brilliant to hear. So, how far along are you with the rules then? Whereabouts are you in the development process?
So at the moment, we've got like early playtest rules which are available for Patreon subscribers. So these are playtesting to help us kind of balance things out, because as game designers, there's only so much we can do to make sure the game is balanced. So we've opened up for early playtesting, and in the meantime, we've been working at some pace to produce the first set of rules, which is going to cover the Spring Offensive, and that will include the core rulebook and then army lists for Britain, Germany, France, and the United States, with a couple of platoons for each. That's pretty much about 90% there. We're just tweaking the physical design of the book, so making sure the images are the best quality they can be, that sort of thing. And then that should be ready for April when we're at Salute.
So fantastic. And how do people find out about what's going on with development and stuff? Have you got a website, Facebook page? How do people find out about your stuff?
Yeah, sure. So probably the best way to do it is we've got a Patreon up under Warfulcrum Games. We're also on Instagram and Facebook. So at Warfulcrum Games. So those are good places to check out. We will be at Salute. So if you're at Salute, come and say hi. We'll be doing the Battle of Villers Bretonneux. So the first tank battle in history. So we will be around in the hall. And plan is to launch a Kickstarter in mid-April. So, details TBC. We'll be putting stuff out, obviously, like on the socials and Patreon and stuff that I've just mentioned.
Excellent. Well, it's been great chatting with you guys, and it's been lovely to talk to enthusiastic people who are pushing things like this, especially historical. So the best of luck with the rules, and I should be at Salute with my Italian Risorgimento game. So if I get 2 minutes, I'll bob over and say hello. But good luck, guys.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Right, so that was a lovely chat with Sam and James about their new World War I rules. And we're now going to move on to Rhys Humphrey. And Rhys is starting a big project of his own. So hi there, Rhys. How are you getting on, mate?
Hello. Yeah, good. I'm just sat at the hobby desk at the moment as we speak, actually.
Oh, fantastic. And just as a bit of background then, so kind of, how old are you? What's kind of your wargaming history?
Yeah, so I'm in my early 40s. I, like a lot of people, I started off with Airfix figures when I was a kid, and had boxes of Airfix and Revell plastic 1/72 scale figures, and sort of started off collecting them and then playing with them on my parents' lounge floor carpet. I used their fireplace as like a castle, effectively, in battlements, etc.
Oh, superb!
Yeah. Use the old imagination, and it progressed from there, really. And luckily, I had a mate, who was the same age as me, and his dad was actually seriously into Napoleonic wargaming, which I didn't even know was a thing until he showed me his table and his Essex figures.
Cool.
15mm figures, and I was just stunned. And he had hundreds upon hundreds of them set up in a sort of study area on this big table, and it just mesmerised me really. And from that moment onwards, I realised you could mail order metal figures that were sort of sculpted, purpose made for the job of wargaming, and that you could actually play with proper rules instead of just flicking marbles at them or pretending that.
Oh,
Yeah,
superb.
yeah.
Yeah. Oh, brilliant. And you've decided then to move on and do a big project
Yes.
with 28mm, and you've chosen the Battle of Ashdown in 871.
871, yeah.
Yeah, which is Dark Ages. Are you a Dark Ages man, Rhys?
I am indeed. Yeah, very
Good
much.
lad.
Very much school of Mr. Wood there. Yeah.
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 I've had another caller on earlier on who was a Dark Ages man as well. So
Excellent. Yeah.
Alex Sutherland, I'm sorry, mate, but you're wrong.
Yeah,
We're at least 4-0 up on this particular one. So what was it about that battle, Rhys, that kind of tweaked your interest and you thought, I'm going to do this, I'm going to recreate this?
Well, there was a sort of, it was a series of battles around that time in sort of over January, February, March. There were a series of battles between the Saxons and the Vikings, the great heathen army at that time, that sort of had come about in 865 and continued to campaign across Northumbria, Mercia, and into Wessex as well. And it was it's unusual in that it was actually fought during the winter, which is very unusual for medieval battles, because obviously I was a medieval reenactor for a while, and there's no way I would want to wear chainmail or armour in the freezing cold. There's just no way. It's bad enough wearing it in summer, but yeah.
You didn't go out in the freezing cold weather with just your chainmail on them.
No, not in the cold weather. No. I have tried naked chainmail, and that's not good.
Yeah, not good. So what you're going to go 28mm? You're going to go big. What figures have you chosen?
So, in fact, I did choose to go 28mm. So I've been listening to your podcast for a while and the stuff that you do, and obviously other people do as well. And I never really understood how people got these projects off the ground, let alone maintained them and saw them through to the end. Or I know your Italian Wars is ever ongoing, isn't it? You're always adding to it.
That's never going to end. Never going to end.
Yeah. So I thought, well, if other people can do it, then there must be a way to do it. So I've got to just sort of get on with it, really, as you say. Stop fucking around and get it done.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I think you were after my top 5 tips, and it was the question, wasn't it, when you sent the email?
Yeah. So what from all your years of experience are your top 5 tips for keeping a large 28mm Wargames project going?
Oh, hey, good job I've written some down here.
Just
yeah. So number 1 for me is always planning. I plan the project.
I've come to realise that's a big thing, really, isn't it? Prepare yourself mentally and plan it in your head, and it gives you the start of a fighting chance, doesn't it?
Yeah. So I mean, this the battle that you've chosen. Then how many men are involved on each side? Do you know?
Well, no one really knows. If anyone says, "Oh, it involved 2,000 warriors on each side," they're talking about their bottoms, because no one really knows. There's estimates of so the Vikings could have had between 40 and 80 men per ship. No one's really sure. The ships got bigger as the centuries progressed. They got bigger and better. But exactly how many fighting men would get aboard a single ship for a big campaign, which promised sort of a lot of loot, which is very much a Viking motivator. No one's really sure. I mean, conservative estimates are about 2,000 to 3,000 a side, but I'm in the boat that I think there was probably a lot more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
quite a big
you've got...
campaign. Wessex is fighting for its life at this point. It's
Yeah.
Athelstan and his brother Alfred, who would later become king. Athelstan actually dies, and it's suspected he dies as a result of wounds sustained during this campaign.
Yeah, so there's quite a bit to go on then. So planning out your units and what you're gonna get and buying the figures, that's all a big part of it.
Yes.
And then there's a famous saying that of how do you eat an elephant? And the answer is one bite at a time. And it's that breaking the
absolutely.
project down into small, manageable bits.
Yes.
Because I've known a lot of people in the past go, right, I'm going to paint a 128 figure lance neck pipe block, and they do 2 figures and give up.
And that's what I that is very true. And I found that you have to you have to start small and build up to it. It's almost like you have to train yourself to painting more and more at a time. That's what I've found has helped me anyway. So I'll start off by painting 4 figures, and then I'll move up to painting 8 figures, and then 16, and then I did 32, and then I did 48, and that's how I've done it. And I've now got a couple of a couple of boxes of A4 really useful boxes that are full of painted figures now, and I think, well, I've got this far, I can keep going now.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And what I always like to do is to give myself some, like, a treat. So you might have, with my plants and wild project that I'm doing at the moment,
Yes.
I've got bucket loads of Prussian landwear to do. So I'll rattle through some of them and then treat myself to a French Guard unit. So it gives you something to look forward to rather than doing all the really cool stuff and then going, oh God, I've got 500 spearmen to paint, and you just can't get through it. So that's another good one. And then a palette cleansers. I don't know if you've got any other projects on the go, but sometimes it's nice to just. I'm doing some ships at the moment, so I might do a big unit and then just completely come away from it and do a ship or something along those lines. Have you got other side projects on the go?
Yeah, I have. Obviously, being a war gamer, obviously there's a bit of a shameful a stash of shame, shall we say? So I've got other bits and bobs. I've got an ongoing Callistra 12mm American Civil War project, and I've painted hundreds upon hundreds of figures for that, and but I'm still not at the bottom of the boxes yet, because I tend to buy a big load in one go, especially if there's a sale on, and then and then I'll just stash it and work through it. So that's a never-ending project, but that's obviously in 12mm, so they're really quick and easy to paint. So if I need a break, I can just get sort of 100 12mm men out, prime them, and just splash paint on them, and they'll be done in a few days.
The final one I've got on my 5, and this is one I did a while back. I was painting a Roman legion from the Republican period. What I did was I got the bases for the troops, and I put them all out on the table in the formation of the legion. So all I've got is a table full of MDF.
Brilliant.
And took a photograph.
Yeah.
And then every time I finished a base, I exchanged the blank base for the completed base and took another photograph.
Oh, that's a brilliant idea.
And then did like a little stop motion video of the project as it grows, and it really kept me motivated. Kept me motivated. It was a good one.
That's a brilliant idea. Yeah.
So how long do you think it's going to take you to get it all together, Rhys?
Oh, I'm focusing on the Saxons at the moment. I've assembled some Vikings. I'm using Victrix figures. Everything I've got at the moment is Victrix hard plastic 28mm figures, which I bought in their Black Friday sale. So how long is it going to take to get two? I don't want two small armies. So I'm not going to use them until I've got two decent sized armies. So I'm probably looking at least 18 months to 24 months I've planned for. And hopefully I'll have two big armies at the end of 3 years. That's the overall plan. It's a 3-year plan.
So, well, I mean that's a good thing, and a good thing to realise with the bigger projects is that they do take time,
Yes.
and
Yeah.
you know you can't put 1,000 figures on the table after 2 weeks of painting. It's just
it's
not
never
going
going to
to
happen.
happen.
No, because we all have to work. We all have to have commitments, personal and professional. So yeah, it's just when you do find the time to paint, being as disciplined as you possibly can be without and trying not to get distracted.
Exactly. Well, unfortunately, time's against us, Rhys. So
Okay.
we're gonna have to call it a day there. But I want to wish you all the best with the project. And
Brilliant.
if you're on Facebook, join the Yorkshire Gamer page, the
Yes.
Yorkshire
Yeah.
Gamer group, and
Yeah.
just post some stuff up as you go
I'll
along.
post up in there. Yeah. Brilliant.
Lovely. Well, thanks a lot, Rhys, and I'm sure we'll talk again soon.
That's great. Thank you, Ken. Thanks for your time.
Well, that was a great chat with Rhys there about his Battle of Ashdown project, and we're now going abroad. We're going to the USA and Vermont, and we're going to be speaking to Harry Vocal. Is it? Let me pronounce your last name.
Yeah, it's vocal, just like speaking.
Excellent.
Yeah, like being vocal. You know what I mean?
It's spelt very differently, but how's Vermont at the moment? Then is it as cold as it looks on telly?
Yeah, definitely cold, definitely snowy. We actually just had a big snowstorm today, so we actually have a true winter this year.
Oh, fantastic! And just a bit of background then. Sort of, how old are you? How did you get into gaming? What sort of things are you into?
Yeah, so I'm in my 30s. I originally got in early 30s. I got into gaming actually as a younger kid. I remember reading the historical stuff came from reading like a historical encyclopedia or something that my elementary school had, and there was a picture of like Hannibal crossing the Alps into Italy, and that kind of inspired me. And then like that same year, I was going to a hobby store with my grandfather, and we weren't going there for the miniatures, but they had some of those hacked
Oh yes, yeah,
1/72
yeah.
figures on the shelf, and I just saw them, and I thought about that, book that I was reading, and I was like, all right, I gotta get by those, and the passion has kind of been there ever since. I mean, I fell off a little bit in the teen years and whatnot, but once I got a job and started working, I was like, I need something to do in the evenings other than watch TV. So
In your email, you were kind of it says inspiration, or are you blaming me for getting into big battles?
yeah, I mean, my bank account might not be happy about it, but yeah, you're definitely to blame for taking it to the next level. So I got into the historicals, and I started out kind of small, and I found your podcast, and I was listening to it, and a couple of the episodes, like the one with Martin Kelly, I was like, you know what, I'm convinced here. I think the big battles is the way to go. I'm not happy with my, couple figures on the table here. Like I want to do something big. So that inspired me to end up going to Historicon last year and bringing probably one of the biggest 28 mil games that was at the convention, and I won't take all the credit. It was a group effort to bring the game in, but we had, 2,000 plus miniatures on the table for Historicon, so it was a pretty good success. And it was you're to blame, I'm afraid, for that one.
And what was the game that you put on at Historicon?
Yeah, so the game that we put on was the Battle of Strasbourg in I think it's like 350 AD, somewhere in that time period, and it's in the late Roman Empire period, and basically the barbarians cross the Rhine, and they're rampaging through Gaul, and the Romans, are trying to throw them out, basically. So I think at that time, I was reading a lot about that campaign, and I was like, you know what, this is the one we're gonna do. So I just kind of jumped in and did it. And the first big game was definitely a learning experience, like all the pieces that need to come together for that. It was a little stressful, but we pulled it off, and we're planning for another big game in 2026, and I think this one is going to be a lot smoother. But yeah.
So you mentioned we a few times there. Have you got a gaming group, or is it a group of friends? Who puts all this together?
Yeah, so actually, it's kind of funny. So I have a YouTube channel, actually, a very small YouTube channel, but I've got a couple, people that you chat to and whatnot on YouTube. And so I announced, like, what, I'm gonna do this Historicon game. And then one person who I'd traded comments back and forth was like, you know what, I want to do a late Roman army too. Like I'm in it for Historicon as well. So we'd actually never met in person before, and ended up collaborating over YouTube. So I think we were both kind of taking a risk there, that the other person would actually like show up.
Yeah.
And he had a local friend to him who was interested in it as well. So that guy came. But like I said, I'm in Vermont, in New England, up near Canada. And then he was actually was over in Arizona, so about as
Oh,
far as you possibly could get in the
yeah.
continental United States, like 3,000 miles away. So, but we ended up doing the collaboration, and he flew his army out on the airplane to
Wow.
Pennsylvania, yeah, where Historicon is. So it was a little crazy, but we ended up, it ended up all coming together. So.
So have you got a group near you that you game with regularly then?
Um, Sort of, I would say. So, where I live anyways, like Vermont, I'm sure many of your listeners have probably never even heard of our state. We're one of the smaller, more rural states in the
Yeah.
country. So in in my area, there's actually more historical gaming than you might expect, but no one really doing these 28 millimeter projects, and especially not ancients. Like, I think I might be the only ancients person with interest in ancients in the state, to be honest. Most of it's as far as historical goes is World War II, and maybe and some other conflicts, but no one else is really doing big stuff like this near me. I do have some people like in Massachusetts that I play with, which is in a different state, and there's some in Maine as well, but there's not a ton going on in Vermont, to be honest.
Yeah. So how do you then keep your motivation to get these big armies together for the historical?
Yeah, so for me, I think one, I just have a real interest just in the historical time period beyond the gaming. And, I probably play maybe a game every 2 months in different
Hmm.
situations. But part of my motivation is like, if I want to play ancient games, at the end of the day, I got to collect both armies,
Yeah.
and I got to I have to do the work. And I think there's a double-edged sword to that. I mean, on one side, it's a lot of work, and especially when I was first getting started into the hobby, it's kind of a challenge to even figure out how to paint the miniatures, and then you paint
Yeah.
them and they look like crap, and you're like, how am I ever going to get an army together? But after a couple years of chipping away at it, now I'm like, okay, I know what I like, and now I can build the armies to look like how I want them to be, and I have kind of control over it. So yeah, maybe a long-winded answer, but yeah, my
No,
motivation, I think the passion, and then, if it's going to happen, I'm going to have to do it. And there's some ancients players in Massachusetts who I connect with and stuff, but that's like a 3-hour drive for me potentially to go there. So it's not like you're doing that every week or every month, that's a couple times a year type
yeah,
deal.
it's great to see and hear your enthusiasm for it. It's really refreshing, and so many people these days just give up. I do 2 figures. Oh, I can't do anymore. It's too stressful. So it's great to hear. What's your YouTube channel called?
Yeah, so it's called it's called Triarius Wargaming. So like the Roman Triarius from the Republican Army. So
Mm.
probably could have picked a better, more easy to find name, but
Yeah,
there we go.
yeah. And is it do you regularly put stuff on there? Do you put like your progress and updates on there?
Yeah, so I probably upload to the channel maybe like being honest, maybe once or twice a month. As
Yeah.
Twice a month is like a good month for me right now. But yeah, most of it is the painting progress and things like that. I mean, I have done the occasional battle report, but what I found with those is you have to set up the game for the battle report. And when you have
Mm.
like your buddy over, you know, if you're making the battle report, it's a battle report session, not a gaming session. And I would
Yeah.
just rather
I
like play the game, you know what I mean? So
yeah. I always find that if I've tried it a couple of times to film a game, and then I always forget. So
yeah.
we'll get so into the game that I'll come to edit it later on, and then all the exciting stuff I've missed because I've been too much enjoying the game too much.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. It's like it's like the fun stuff, like you can't pick up on camera and you're too busy having fun to think about filming it. And as soon as you do film it, it's like you kind of ruin the magic anyways. So yeah, I mainly stick to the hobby updates and that kind of thing.
What's the access to figures and stuff like for you? Do you have a local shop where you can buy, or is everything mail order?
In terms of like getting the historical miniatures, it's like all mail order. So in the town that I live in, I'm fortunate enough to have a local game store. And in terms of the miniatures, like all the miniatures there are, GW Games
Mm,
Workshop or other, more that kind of thing. But what is nice is like, in terms of like paint and those like basic supplies, I can just pick up at that store. But in terms of figures right now, I'm pretty much mailing all of it in, all online. So, I mean, that I think is one benefit of the internet. I don't think I would be
mm.
into this hobby the same way without being able to see what's out there. Yeah, as like a kid, I mean, I would get those 1/72nd scales things, but it was kind of like you're at the mercy of whatever they
Yeah.
decide to have in the store, and it's kind of a random. So it was kind of a random selection and everything.
Yeah, and what are the kind of go-to manufacturers for your ancient projects then?
Yeah. So with the big battle stuff, I would say probably about 80% of my collection is Victrix. And
Yep.
especially so that first big project, the late Romans and the barbarians, I was fortunate enough with that project, and part of the driver with that project is the plastics were available to make up the bulk of the forces for that. Doing over 1,000 miniatures, I mean, there's a price tag to that, and
Mm,
I would say I actually prefer the metals, but in terms of getting the volume, I think you need to go plastic. But what I do is I usually sprinkle the metals in, and there are some metal ranges I really love, like Aventine miniatures, for example, or some of the
Lovely.
Foundry stuff. And what I do is, the plastics can make up the bulk, but then try and get the metals to kind of stand out and make the units look cool. Is kind of my approach.
Yeah. And do you get on all right with the plastics, putting them all together then? Because that kind of becomes another part of the hobby, doesn't it? Building
Yeah.
the figures.
Yeah, when I was doing, before I got into the big battles, I didn't think too much about the plastic
Yeah.
assembly. Once I
Yeah.
started to do this project, it was especially, I did all the Romans first, and then I got to the barbarians, and I had, 800 barbarians to do or something. That's when I started
Yeah.
to go get really fed up with assembling, even if it's just gluing on an arm and a head or something. It's not the
Yeah.
full assembly. Even that was kind of driving me insane. I guess the good thing about it is it's kind of mindless, so you can, do something else as well in the background or fit it. Sometimes with like painting, I will say that sometimes with painting, it's like you got to be in the right mindset. Like if you're just too tired or whatever, it doesn't go as well. But the assembly, you can be kind of a zombie and just sort of assemble, when you're not feeling up to much, I guess is what I would say.
Yeah. So this new project then, the one I think you said, did you say 26 that you were looking for?
Yes, yeah,
Um,
26th.
yeah. How far down the line are you with that project?
Yes. So basically, the first big game at Historicon, that was kind of, I would say, our trial run, and it went really well. So we decided, okay, we've all got different stuff going on in our lives. We're not going to be able to bring a new project next year, but we will give ourselves 2 years to pull something together. And that was kind of driven by things we had already wanted to collect. So our next project is going to be the Punic Syracuse Wars. So before the Punic Wars, there was wars between Carthage and the Greek city of Syracuse, and we landed on that one because I think there was interest. Some of us already had Greek stuff collected, some already had Carthaginians. So it's like, let's make this work. Find a battle in that period that we could do, and that's maybe a little different from what you usually see. But
Yeah.
that project is going pretty well. I think. I mean, I really started in earnest working on my sections this fall and this winter, especially Thanksgiving, Christmas, and I've got right now probably about 250 figures completed, and we're looking at. There's three of us doing it. We're each looking at bringing about 800 figures to the game,
Cool.
and I think I will. I think I'm going to exceed that. I mean, 800 is kind of the benchmark, but I mean, I think I'm going to be able to pull together maybe about 1,000-ish for the
Oh,
project. We'll see, but so we might be.
music to my ears.
Yeah, so we might be about 3,000. If we have 3,000 figures for the game, that would be awesome. But we're gonna have at least about 2,500. Either way.
Fantastic. Well, thank you for coming on the show, Harry. Your enthusiasm is catching, mate. I'm really glad, really happy to talk to you. It's been a really nice conversation, and best of luck for your Historicon game in next year. And I just wish you all the best with the projects.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, and I hope you have a great rest of your evening. I hope you take care.
Well, thanks very much to Harry over there in Vermont. That was a great chat. Young lad, very keen on his wargaming, which is lovely to see. And we're now joined for our final guest of the first ever listener phone in, and that's Chris Gosney. Hi, Chris. How are you doing, mate?
Yes, very well. Thanks for Ken. Thanks for having me.
Excellent. And whereabouts in the glorious United Kingdom are you based?
Yes, I live in Salisbury, Old Sarum in Wiltshire, southwest of London.
Oh, so you are definitely below the avocado line.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, anything north of the M4 is northerner for me, mate.
Oh, bless you. And have you been gaming all your life, or is it something new?
Say all my life. I mean, I've done the classic. I have to say, I've done the classic, the Airfix, and the usual sort of stuff when I was a kid. I'm ex-military, so spent 30 years not doing a lot of stuff because you're busy doing other things, and got back into it fairly recently. I think about the last sort of 6-7 years I've been getting into it more. Like I say, seriously, yeah.
Oh, brilliant! Did you listen to the interview with Andy Johnson? He was ex Coldstream Guards. That was a good chat about military life.
I did, yeah. I mean, shame he's a bit of a Percy Pongo, but there we are. I'm ex-Royal Marine, you see.
Right, okay. I take it there's no love between the two.
No, they're okay. I know a few guardsmen. They're all right, not too bad.
All right, just not as good as you guys in the wet though.
Nah, clearly
not. And Chris is helping himself to a glass of red. There, is it anything special, or is it Asda House?
It's not quite Asda, but it's not. It's your bog standard Rioja, I think, mate.
Oh, excellent. I don't know much about wine other than the price, and then I go, how much?
Well, of course.
Yeah. And then you drink the cheap one, and it's absolutely rubbish. You put in your email that you were going to have a chat with us about solo wargaming. So, is that your main kind of way that you partake in the hobby?
Yeah, it is. I mean, I said solo wargaming with the addition of filming for YouTube channel.
Yeah.
Because I think that's slightly different. Everybody can solo wargame to a certain degree. Some people like it, some people don't. I do probably out of choice, I think. But I also, more recently, in the last 18 months, decided to start filming and put it on YouTube. And I thought it might be quite interesting for people to listen to how I do that and my thoughts about that sort of thing.
Yeah. So the YouTube channel is called...
it's the Krusty Colonel's Wargame Show.
Krusty Colonel,
which is not necessarily very interesting and particular. I went around the bazaars thinking about various titles, and I thought, I'll just stick with something simple.
Yeah. No, it's an interesting, because I've spoken to somebody earlier on in the show who decided to name their channel after an obscure Roman general, and of course nobody could spell it. So
exactly. Yeah.
So Krusty
Be careful
Colonel,
what you wish for.
Exactly, Krusty Colonel. It's got a ring to it. People can remember it, and even the worst spellers of us could manage to type that into the YouTube. So how long's that channel? Yeah, you would hope so, wouldn't you? How long's the channel been going then, mate?
Oh, I think it's about 18 months now, and I've just over the Christmas period hit 1,000 subscribers, which is really good. That's fantastic. Yeah, I love it.
Yeah, that is good. That is good. And what was the drive for you then to do a channel? What was your thoughts behind doing that?
Yeah, good question. Several things really. First of all, like I said, going back to my sort of history, I got late or back into the wargaming hobby late, and I started watching a bit of YouTube. In fact, when I used to do a lot of time away, and I found bizarrely some wargaming podcasts which I'd never heard of before. Yeah. WSS, Two Fat Ladies and stuff, and I don't think you were
the rubbish ones.
But anyway,
rubbish ones.
Yeah, all the rubbish ones. Yeah,
all the rubbish ones.
And I so that piqued my interest, and I was away a lot, and I took some stuff away to paint stuff like this. So I was always quite solo when I was away because of where I was working. Anyway, I came back, watched a lot of Alex Sutherland stuff, Storm of Steel, which I know you know of, and I thought, this is fantastic. And at the time, I was buying a lot of little miniatures and stuff, painting a lot, but not doing a lot of playing. Yeah. And I thought, and I watched, like I say, Alex's channels, and I thought, I'll give this a go. So I was doing some solo gaming and playing with my lad. He's not that interested in it. But I thought, do you know what? I'll try this filming malarkey. And so that's what I started doing. And what I thought I would do, my angle, is to showcase some of the lesser known games or rule sets or periods without being too obscure, because obviously nobody would watch you, but they wouldn't be interested.
Yeah.
So I started off with the Two Fat Ladies Dux Britanniarum, because I love that period of history.
Yeah.
But there was nothing out there, hardly anything out there. So I started off with that. And obviously some of the early videos are a bit basic. But ultimately it was a fun project, and it still is. And I absolutely love it, and that sort of drove me from just doing solo into actually filming it and then producing something that hopefully other people will enjoy.
So would you say Dark Ages or early medieval?
I would say Dark Ages.
Good lad. Good lad.
Hey, have I passed one of your questions on your 20 questions? How to be a Yorkshire chap?
It's
that should be a new question.
Yeah, you mentioned. Yeah, actually, I might do that. It's just to annoy Alex Sutherland. Really, you mentioned his name, and he's a big early. I can't even remember what he calls it now. Early medieval or something like that. And everyone I've had on the show tonight, and we've talked about this period of history, has called it the Dark Ages. So,
yeah, early medieval. I mean, that's just a typical archaeologist's take on it, isn't it? We all know it for what it is.
Exactly, mate. Exactly. So you've do you do any gaming outside of the channel then? Do you have go to a club or anything like that? It's mostly...
No, I don't. Yeah, regrettably, there is they call it a Wargames club, literally 2 minutes from my front door, around at the old railway tavern, not the railway tavern, the railway workers' man's club. And I'm a member of their little Facebook page, and all they do is this fantasy stuff and malarkey. Oh my God, so I'm like, no, sorry, fellas. I suppose I could gird my loins and take down my, cloth and all my little minis and do a chain of command, run out for them, but I don't think I'll get much joy out of it, to be honest.
No, it's you just need, sometimes you don't know, there's like little secret like clubs in people's houses around the country, and just 5 or 6 people who get together, and sometimes they could just be round the corner and you've got no idea that they're there. So
exactly.
You never know. There might be somebody listening to this near to you, Chris, who goes, "Oh, I know him," and you might find a regular gaming partner. But onto the solo stuff then, and the filming. What's kind of different to playing the game without a camera there and playing the game with a camera there? Are do you film all of it and edit it, or do you film the highlights? How do you go about planning how you're going to put a video together about a battle?
Yeah, I don't plan at all. I just crack on.
Yeah.
Which sounds a bit random, but no, I'm fortunate in that I've got my own playing space, so I can leave the game running for a few days if I need to, and sometimes I do, because what people don't realise, unless you're this side, as in my side of the camera, it does take an awful long time to film some basic stuff. And then you've got to edit it. So so there's no plan. I'll set a game up, and what I do like to do, actually, I'll have to say this, I do like to do campaigns, because I love the narrative of a little story from one game to another, and that it has an impact and whatever, and there's sort of might be a hero type character or a particular whatever leader that commander you want to follow. So I do like to do that sort of thing rather than just this one-off game, which I do occasionally. I might do a few historical reenactments of a particular battle. But essentially, I'll set the game up, and then as long as it takes to film and edit is the case. It's as simple as that, really.
And do you aim for a time length for your videos? Have you found like a sweet spot to get the message across?
Yeah, good question. Good question. I started off one of my first few videos, and I actually looked back at them not that long ago, and actually from the production perspective, they're not too bad, but the length is dreadful. Because the first episode was, I think I did an hour, and then it's part 1. Then the second one was part 2, another hour, and no, it doesn't work. My perspective is it's got to be certainly sub 1 hour. I think a long game for me will be about 45, and I do bang out a few sort of 25 and perhaps 15 minuters. I think, some people love the long games. They love to get really immersed into what they're seeing and see all the dice rolls and stuff. Others, they just want a quick game, just a quick sort of scan of what's happening. So, no one video length will suit anybody. We all skip through videos. I just sort of produce something I think I can't edit it down any more than what it is. Sometimes I'll skip a few turns because nothing much happens in the first few turns. If the two sides are too far away, there's no point in doing that for too long. But once you get into the nitty gritty, I tend to do most of the filming of all of the combat and the moves because that's what it's all about from my perspective, anyway.
Yeah, the actual meat of the battle, so to speak.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
Yeah, have you invested in any specific equipment or software? What sort of stuff do you use? He's smiling here. What sort of stuff do you use?
Yeah, exactly. No, this is my thing, and this is right up the Yorkshire gamers perspective. I would imagine I've done bugger all from that perspective. I bought myself a tripod. Two tripods. I tell you, two tripods. One's a big one, one's a small one. I'll send you through the photos. You can show them on your YouTube, Jobby. But no, there's one of the things I wanted to sort of showcase to people is the fact that you can do this with no great expense. So I do it on one mobile phone. I did start with 2, but that was a right pain in the arse trying to synchronize the 2 films on, when to do the high picture, sort of the God's own view versus the, nitty gritty. And after a while, I gave up. But if you look back at some of my earlier videos, you'll see the God's own view versus the other one. And yeah. Anyway, so I just stuck with one mobile, one large tripod, one small tripod, like a little gorilla gripper thing. I've got a standard lamp. You can probably see it behind me shining on a belty pate at the moment. And that is it. And the software, I did splash out, buying the licensing for the software, but it's not that brilliant. It keeps on crashing every now and again. Yeah. But nothing fancy with this. But I like to think that I can push out something that is good. I quite like what I see. And, when I look at it at what other people are doing, I think it measures reasonably well. That's my opinion. I would say that.
This ultra professional stuff that's done. I'm thinking about Little Wars TV and stuff like that. That's they've spent a lot of money on the background stuff. And then there's like you've done, and to be honest, that's exactly what I do. I use my phone, I use tripods, I've got some LED lights that I use to brighten things up, and you can just do it with relatively minimal outlay.
Yes, you can. I don't think there's any necessity for the bells and whistles for everything. One thing I try and do is give a little bit of ambience as well to the videos. So I do a bit of soundtrack with explosions going off and gunfire, whatever it may be. And you can get all that free downloads off it, the old internet and whatever. But it just sort of gives a little bit of background to whatever you're doing. So yeah, that's the only sort of additional thing I'll do. But that's nothing fantastical. You've got to be careful of copyright, of course, with these.
Oh, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Stuff these days.
Yeah. And how long does it take you then to, let's say we've got a typical just under an hour film. How long does it take you to put that together as an edited final release? Yeah.
Well, it all depends on the rules. Because I've been filming some Napoleonic sailing stuff, fighting sail, Osprey's rules, very simple rules. Some lovely 1-2-400 models from Tumbling Dice. Obviously, nice flat terrain. You
Yeah,
haven't got the hills on the ocean.
That's what I love about naval wargaming.
Yes, exactly. I know you like the bit of naval stuff, and the rules are really simple compared to some naval stuff, and I can bang one of those out. Filming wise, in probably, I don't know, about 3 hours or so, and that's probably spread over a few days.
Yeah.
And editing will be probably at least 2 hours, and then editing will be another hour just to check everything's okay. So what's that, about 6 hours? Now that's quite a simple game for about a 20-minute slot. If I'm doing something more complex, and I've recently been getting into 6mm General d'Armée 2,
yeah,
of which I'm not overly familiar with the rules, but I'm getting better. It takes an awful long time to get the angle, because the thing is, you've got to work out the camera angles as well. And until you understand the rules, do you want to show, what do you actually want to show? It's not as simple as you think it might be, just putting a tripod overviewing everything. You don't want to do that necessarily. So it does take a long time to understand that. And so, cut to the chase, General d'Armée, a 50-minute video of that will probably be double the time I've talked about doing the Napoleonic sailing thing.
So once you've done everything and it comes out, are you able to watch your own stuff again? It's something I struggle with podcasts, because I do the interview, we have a chat, I do the editing, so I've listened to it again, and then I put it all together and put it out, and then I don't listen to it again because I've heard it so many times. Do you watch your final edits and make sure they're right, or are you a bit like me and going, well, all the bits are right, so it must be?
No, Ken, I'm very narcissistic or whatever it's called. I watch myself all the time. I go down in my little snug down in my house and put it on. I fall asleep to it, and I'll check all this and whatever. My wife goes, "What are you doing? You're listening to yourself. What are you watching yourself for?" No, because what I'm doing is being hypercritical and watching it and going, "Oh, bugger that! I should have done that there and whatever. I'll do it next time."
Yeah.
But I also am constantly comparing my videos with somebody else's videos and thinking, right, is that better? Is that worse? I mean, it's not a competition at all, but I'm just trying to improve what I do. So yes, I do watch what I've put out a few times.
Oh,
got to bump the numbers up as well.
Yeah. Oh, bless you. What improvements then are you looking towards putting in your videos? Are there any things that are itching away at you? You think, I should be doing this, or I need this bit of kit, or whatever?
Kit wise, I don't think so. If anything, probably microphone. You'll see I'm wearing my little headphone with a boom mic. Yeah. I know sometimes that the sound qualities, drifts out every now and again, but it's not that bad. Production wise, I just think it would naturally get better, and I know it has done over the last 18 months, because you just learn how to do certain things, when to not you might film it, but you'll edit it out, or different camera angles, or whatever it may be. Simple things. Again, going back to the Napoleonic ships, I like to put the cotton wool down when the guns fire, and I'll put the sound effect in on that, but I'll do all my commentary before, put the cotton wool down, roll the dice, so when I edit it, the sound effect comes in just as the cotton wool appears on the screen, and it looks as though it ties in with the barrage going, or the broadside going, which it's a minor thing, but I quite like the effect of that, and it is very simple, but that's something I've learnt, albeit very simply, over the last few months.
Yeah. So did you have any experience of making films, or no, even photography or anything like that beforehand?
Oh no, my photography is absolutely rubbish. So no, not at all. No, I mean, these mobile phones we have in our hands these days are absolutely fantastic. They can do some wonderful things with it, and far more complex than I would ever do. I just point it and basically press the video button, and that's it. Away we go. Simple.
Yeah. The tech in our phones is absolutely amazing.
Yeah.
I've got it was state of the art when it came out. Digital SLR camera at work, and
yeah. But it's been superseded, isn't it? Really,
I can get better photographs on my phone.
Yeah, Exactly. Exactly.
It's just absolutely mad. But there we go.
Mm.
So, Krusty Colonel is the place to go for your videos, and hopefully you'll get a lot more subscribers as a result of this, mate.
I'm sure I'll get thousands, mate.
They'll all go, "Who's that Southerner?" Well, it's been lovely chatting with you, Chris. Thanks for spending some time with us today and being the last guest on the listener phone in number 1.
Yeah, lovely, Ken. Thanks very much for the opportunity, and good to talk to you.
Cheers, mate. Thank you. Well, there you go. That was the first ever Yorkshire Gamer listener phone in. Let me know what you think. It might be the last one. You might all think it's a load of rubbish. I actually really enjoyed it. There was some really enthusiastic people there who might not have had an opportunity to be on a podcast before. We spoke to people who are just really keen about the hobby, and we had a good laugh as well, which is more or less what this podcast is about. So, normally, I don't particularly ask for feedback and stuff like that, but on this case, if you wouldn't mind, if you just let me know your thoughts. Do you think it's a good idea? Should I do more of them? If yes, if you'd like to be a guest, then drop me an email to yorkshiregamer@gmail.com, and we'll see what sort of response I get, and maybe do one in the summer or sometime. Let's see how it goes. But let's see what the feedback is like for this particular show. And in general, if you do listen to this, please like and leave a review wherever you listen to it. It makes a massive difference to the algorithms on the podcast hosts, and just enables other people to see the Yorkshire Gamer podcast and give them a chance to listen, and then turn off 10 minutes later in disgust. But never mind, that's my problem. It's getting them to listen in the first place. That's what I'd like. So, just before we round off, then the next episode, I'm going to be speaking with Martin Kelly, and Martin is a former guest of mine, and he's big into his big games in America, and he's putting on a massive game of Pavia from the Italian Wars, and we're going to have a deep dive into the battle. We're going to talk a little bit about the history, not too much, but we're going to concentrate more on the practicalities of wargaming, one of the largest battles of the Great Italian Wars. So I shall try and get that out around the anniversary, which is the 500th anniversary, which is on the 24th of February this year. And we'll see how close I can get to that. But I'm speaking to Martin later this week, so hopefully I'll be able to put it out on the day, or it's certainly on the week anyway. So enjoy your wargaming until I speak to you later, and thanks for tuning in to the listener phone in. See you next time. See you.